They thought a 70-year-old man with nothing but a dog was an easy target. They threw William Wynn out of the only home he had left, thinking he would simply fade away into the Montana mist. But they forgot one thing. William wasn't just an old man. He was a warrior, and his German shepherd, Smokey, wasn't just a pet. He was a K-9 operative who could scent a lie from a mile away and a secret buried for 30 years. What they were about to dig up wouldn't just save William's dignity. It would dismantle an empire built on shadows. William Wynn stood on the sidewalk, his broad shoulders slightly hunched against the biting wind, but his square jaw remained set like granite. At 50, he still possessed the muscular build of a man who had spent decades in uniform. His moss-green eyes, surrounded by deep crow's feet, watched as his own son pulled the car away, leaving him with nothing but a single suitcase and Smokey. Smokey, a powerful 30 kilograms German shepherd, stood alert by his side. The dog's black and tan coat bristled, his athletic posture radiating a fierce loyalty. He sensed a betrayal. William looked down, his hand resting on the dog's head. "It's just you and me now, boy," he rasped, his voice like grinding gravel. He had a cabin in the Bitterroot Mountains. It was abandoned, decaying, and forgotten, just like him. But as he turned toward the mountains, he didn't see a grave. He saw a fortress. The drive to the Bitterroot Mountains was a journey through time. William's old truck groaned as it climbed the rocky trails, the engine's rhythm matching the steady heartbeat of the K-9 operative in the passenger seat. Smokey's ears were perked, his intense gaze scanning the dense pine trees. William caught his reflection in the rear-view mirror. The military buzz cut, now salt and pepper, and the deep forehead wrinkles that told stories of battles in lands far away. He looked like a man who had seen too much, yet he was heading toward a place that held the only peace he ever knew. When they arrived, the cabin was a skeleton of wood and dust. It had been 30 years since William had stepped foot inside. The air was stale, smelling of dry rot and old memories. He sat on the porch, his short box beard catching the fading light. Smokey didn't rest, however. The dog began to pace the perimeter, his aggressive yet loyal expression softening only when he glanced back at William. Suddenly, Smokey stopped. He wasn't looking at the woods. He was staring at the floorboards of the cabin. A low rumble started in his chest. This wasn't a growl of a predator. It was an alert. William's military instincts, buried under years of civilian neglect, snapped back to life. Smokey began to scratch, his powerful claws tearing at the aged timber. "What is it, Smokey?" William whispered, kneeling despite the ache in his joints. Beneath the dust of 3 decades, something was humming with a dark energy. William watched as Smokey worked with the precision of a trained sapper. The German shepherd's athletic frame was tense, his nose pressed hard against a specific seam in the floorboards near the stone fireplace. William reached for a rusted crowbar he'd found in the shed. With a grunt that strained his broad shoulders, he pried up the wood. He expected dirt or perhaps a nest of rodents. Instead, he found a layer of reinforced steel. It was a hatch, industrial grade and completely out of place in a humble mountain cabin. His moss-green eyes narrowed. He remembered this cabin was once owned by an old contact from his intelligence days, a man who had vanished without a trace in the late 90s. As William cleared the debris, he saw a keypad, its internal battery miraculously still holding a flicker of life. He tried a sequence of numbers, an old unit coordinate he'd never forgotten. With a heavy clunk, the bolts retracted. Smokey didn't hesitate. He stood over the opening, his fierce posture shielding William. As the hatch swung open, a gust of cool, filtered air rushed out. This wasn't just a cellar. It was a high-tech bunker frozen in time. William climbed down the ladder, his powerful jawline tightening. The walls were lined with servers and filing cabinets, all bearing the seal of a government agency that officially didn't exist. Smokey descended behind him, his paws silent on the metal stairs. They weren't in a cabin anymore. They were in the heart of a 30-year-old conspiracy. The bunker was a tomb of information. William walked past rows of black boxes, his rugged skin pale under flickering emergency lights. He opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. As he flipped through the pages, the crow's feet around his eyes deepened. It contained names, powerful names, politicians, CEOs, and high-ranking military officials who were still in power today. They were all linked to a project called Silent Mountain, an illegal surveillance operation that had turned the very citizens they swore to protect into targets. Smokey nudged William's hand, whining softly. The dog moved toward a central desk where a single laptop sat, encased in a ruggedized shell. William opened it, and a video file began to play automatically. It was a recording of a man he recognized, the previous owner of the cabin. The man looked terrified. "If you're seeing this, I'm already gone." The voice echoed through the small space. "They're using the Bitterroot Range as a testing ground for a frequency weapon. It doesn't leave blood, William. It just erases the mind." William felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. He looked at Smokey, the dog's black and tan coat shimmering in the blue light of the screen. They had been sent here to be forgotten, to die quietly in the woods. Instead, they had stumbled upon the one thing that could burn the entire system down. But they weren't alone. Above them, the floorboards of the cabin creaked. William froze. He looked up at the ceiling of the bunker, his moss-green eyes turning sharp and predatory. Smokey's athletic posture shifted instantly. He went into a low crouch. His black ears swiveled toward the hatch. The sound of heavy boots echoed from above. Someone had followed them. Or perhaps they had been waiting for someone to finally open the door they couldn't crack. William reached into a hidden compartment in the desk. Old habits died hard, and pulled out a flare, gun and a tactical knife. No guns, he reminded himself. He had to be smarter than them. "We know you're down there, Win," a voice boomed from the cabin. It was a cold, clinical voice, the kind that belonged to a man who viewed people as statistics. William didn't answer. He signaled to Smokey with a silent hand gesture. The German shepherd moved toward the base of the ladder, his black and tan fur blending into the shadows. William knew the layout now. There was an emergency vent that led to the old well outside. If they stayed, they were trapped. If they moved, they risked everything. "They think I'm a tired old man, Smokey," William whispered, his square jaw set in a grim smile. "Let's show them what a K-9 operative and a veteran can really do." He grabbed the hard drive from the laptop and tucked it into his jacket. The hunt had begun, but this time the prey had teeth. William would move with the calculated silence of a shadow. His broad shoulders brushed against the narrow concrete walls of the ventilation shaft as he climbed toward the surface. Below him, Smokey followed, the German shepherd's claws clicking softly on the metal rungs. The air was thin and smelled of wet earth, but William didn't falter. He could hear the muffled shouts of the men in the cabin above, their boots stomping over the very hatch he had just escaped through. They were frustrated, and a frustrated enemy was a dangerous one. They emerged near the old stone well, hidden by a thicket of overgrown briars. William lay flat on the frozen ground, his moss-green eyes scanning the clearing. 2 black SUVs were parked near his truck, their engines idling like growling beasts. At least 4 men, dressed in high-end tactical gear, were patrolling the perimeter. These weren't local police. They were private contractors, the kind of men William used to train. He felt a surge of adrenaline that smoothed out the wrinkles on his forehead. Smokey pressed his powerful 30 kilograms body against William's side, his black and tan coat vibrating with a suppressed growl. William placed a firm hand on the dog's neck. "Patience, boy," he breathed. He needed a distraction. He looked at the old woodpile near the cabin. If he could trigger a diversion, they could reach the truck and the only road out of these mountains. William reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, high-frequency whistle, a tool he had used to train Smokey for silent maneuvers. He didn't blow it. Instead, he used a piece of fishing line from his survival kit to rig a heavy branch over the woodpile. With a sharp tug, the stack of logs collapsed with a thunderous crash. The contractors immediately pivoted, their flashlights cutting through the darkness toward the noise. "Movement by the shed," one of them yelled. As they rushed toward the diversion, William signaled Smokey. They moved in perfect synchronization. William's muscular build didn't slow him down as he sprinted toward the second SUV. He didn't want to steal it. He wanted to disable it. With a quick, precise movement of his tactical knife, he sliced the tire valves and jammed the ignition sensor. Smokey stood guard, his fierce posture and bared teeth ready to intercept anyone who turned around. One of the guard began to circle back, his flashlight beam swinging dangerously close to them. Smokey didn't bark. He let out a low, vibrating hum in his throat, a warning only William could hear. William grabbed a heavy rock and hurled it deep into the woods in the opposite direction. The guard flinched, turning away for a split second, enough time for William and Smokey to vanish into the tree line, heading for the hidden trail behind the cabin. Deep in the woods, away from the cabin's lights, the forest felt different. The air seemed to shimmer with a strange, static charge. William noticed the crow's feet around his eyes twitching, a sign of the silent mountain frequency the bunker recording had mentioned. Smokey was even more affected. The dog shook his head frequently, his black ears flattened against his skull. William knelt and checked Smokey's black and tan coat for any signs of physical distress. "The weapon is active, isn't it?" he whispered. The powerful K9 operative leaned into him, seeking grounding. William realized they couldn't just run. If this frequency weapon was being tested on the mountain, it was likely affecting the local wildlife and perhaps the small town at the base of the range. He pulled the hard drive from his jacket, its cold metal casing a reminder of the weight of the truth he carried. The data on this drive could stop the pulses, but he needed a powerful transmitter to broadcast the kill code hidden in the files. He remembered an old fire lookout tower 5 miles up the ridge. It was high, isolated, and equipped with a long-range radio array. It was their only shot, but as they began the steep climb, a low hum began to vibrate through the ground, a sound that made William's square jaw ache and Smokey let out a pained whimper. The test was escalating. The climb to the lookout tower was grueling. William's 50-year-old lungs burned, and the deep forehead wrinkles were slick with sweat despite the cold. He looked at Smokey, who was limping slightly but refused to stop. The dog's aggressive yet loyal expression was now one of pure grit. Suddenly, the forest went silent. No wind, no insects, just a heavy, crushing pressure. A pulse hit. William fell to one knee, his moss-green eyes blurring. The world turned into a kaleidoscope of gray and white. He felt his memories slipping. Images of his wife, his service, even the face of his son began to dissolve into static. Smokey felt it too, but the dog's K9 training was centered on a single unbreakable tether, his bond with William. Smokey barked, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the electronic haze. The dog grabbed William's jacket sleeve in his powerful jaws and tugged with all his 30 kilograms weight. The pain and the physical contact snapped William back to reality. He gasped, his powerful jawline tightening as he forced himself to stand. "Thanks, partner," he wheezed, rubbing Smokey's tin ears. They couldn't afford another hit. They reached the base of the lookout tower, just as the headlights of a helicopter appeared in the valley below, searching the ridges. They were being hunted from the air. If you think Smokey is the ultimate hero, hit that like button and subscribe for the next part of the survival story. The fire lookout tower stood like a skeletal sentinel against the moonlit sky. William and Smokey raced up the wooden stairs, each step creaking under their weight. Inside, the small room was filled with old maps and a heavy radio console. William immediately set to work, plugging the hard drive into the console's auxiliary port. His fingers, though thick and calloused, moved with surprising speed across the keys. He was a man of the old school, but he knew enough to navigate the encrypted directories. "Just a few more minutes, Smokey," he muttered. Smokey stood at the glass window, his black and tan coat bristling as the sound of the helicopter grew deafening. The searchlight swept across the tower, illuminating William's rugged, sun-kissed skin. They had been spotted. Below them, at the foot of the tower, the SUVs were arriving. The private contractors were spilling out, weapons drawn, but they had orders not to fire on the equipment. They wanted the drive intact. William saw the progress bar on the screen. 85%, 90%. The door to the tower was kicked open. A tall man with a jagged scar across his face stepped in, pointing a silenced pistol at William. "Step away from the console when—" The man sneered. William didn't move. He looked at Smokey, then back at the man. "You're late," William said, his voice cold as the mountain ice. At that moment, the computer chimed. 100%. Upload complete. The air in the lookout tower was thick with tension. The man with the jagged scar, a lead merc named Miller, kept his pistol leveled at William's chest. "The upload was a mistake when," Miller hissed, "you just signaled every operative in this sector to your exact location." William didn't flinch. His moss-green eyes were steady, reflecting the green glow of the terminal. Beside him, Smokey was a coil of black and tan muscle, his lip curled back to reveal white, sharp teeth. The dog didn't growl. He waited for the command. "I didn't just signal them," William replied, his voice dropping into a dangerous, low register. "I sent the kill code to the satellite link. Your frequency weapon just became a very expensive pile of junk." Miller's eyes widened, and for a split second, his aim wavered. That was all the opening William needed. He didn't reach for a gun. He slammed his heavy palm into the radio console's emergency flare trigger. A blinding burst of red light and heat erupted between them. Miller recoiled, shielded his eyes, and in that heartbeat, William gave the signal. "Smokey, take." The 30 kilograms German shepherd launched himself like a furry missile, his powerful jaws locking onto Miller's forearm before the man could pull the trigger. The tower shook with the struggle. Miller screamed as Smokey's fierce posture bore on the floor. William didn't stay to finish the fight. He knew more were coming. He grabbed the canvas bag containing the original documents and signaled Smokey to disengage. "With me, boy." The dog released Miller and leapt toward William, both of them disappearing through the trapdoor, leading to the tower's maintenance catwalk. They didn't go back down the stairs. William had spotted a heavy-duty zip line used for hauling supplies. With a makeshift harness fashioned from his belt, William gripped the rusted pulley. He pulled Smokey against his broad shoulders, the dog's powerful heart beating fast against his own, and stepped off the edge. They hurtled into the darkness of the Bitterroot mist, the wind whipping past William's salt and pepper hair. Below them, the searchlights of the contractors danced chaotically, unable to track their silent descent. They hit the pine-cushioned ground nearly half a mile away. William groaned, his 50-year-old joints protesting the impact, but he scrambled to his feet. They were deep in the dead zone now, a part of the mountain so dense that even thermal imaging struggled to penetrate the canopy. For hours, they moved through the labyrinth of ancient pines. William's rugged skin was scratched by briars, and the deep forehead wrinkles were etched with exhaustion. Smokey walked at a low heel, his nose constantly working the air. They weren't just running. William was looking for a specific landmark mentioned in the 30-year-old maps. He found it near a hidden waterfall, a granite rock shaped like a soldier's helmet. Behind the cascading water lay a shallow cave, a secondary fallback point Samuel Carter had noted in his ledger. Inside the cave, William finally allowed himself to breathe. He lit a small, shielded fire and checked Smokey's black and tan coat for injuries. The dog was exhausted, but remained alert, his moss-green eyes, so much like his master's, watching the cave entrance. William pulled out a hidden folder he had snatched at the last second from the bunker. It wasn't just about weapons. It was a payroll. He saw a signature that made his powerful jawline lock in fury. It was a man he had trusted, General Vance, the very man who had signed William's retirement papers and suggested he move back to Montana. The betrayal was complete. He hadn't been sent here to rest. He had been sent here to be watched by the very people he thought were his brothers in arms. They didn't think we'd find it. Smokey, William whispered, the firelight casting long shadows over his square-jawed Caucasian face. They thought I was just a broken soldier who wouldn't look on the floorboards. Smokey rested his heavy head on William's knee, his aggressive expression replaced by one of profound empathy. The dog knew the way to betrayal. As William studied the payroll, he realized the scale of the operation. The Silent Mountain Project wasn't just a weapon. It was a way to control the minds of the local population to ensure a compliant workforce for a massive illegal mining operation that the powerful people were hiding. Suddenly, Smokey's ears twitched. He stood up slowly, his fierce posture returning. From the depths of the cave, beyond the reach of the firelight, came a sound that shouldn't have been there, a soft, rhythmic clicking. It was a Geiger counter. William stood up, holding his tactical knife. He moved deeper into the cave, following the sound. Behind a pile of old crates, he found the skeletal remains of a man, Samuel Carter. Beside the body was a final, handheld recording device. William pressed play. The voice was weak, but the words were clear. The mining isn't for minerals, William. It's for something buried deeper. Something ancient that the weapon was meant to keep quiet. The recording ended with a burst of static. William stood in the silence of the cave, his broad shoulders heaving. The mystery had shifted from a military conspiracy to something far more dangerous. The powerful people weren't just hiding weapons. They were guarding a discovery that could change the world or destroy it. Smokey let out a low, mournful howl, a tribute to the man who had died in the shadows to protect this secret. William looked at the reflection of his own moss-green eyes in the blade of his knife. He was 70 years old by the calendar, but tonight He felt the fire of his 20s. He wasn't going to run anymore. He had the documents. He had the kill code. And he had the most loyal K-9 operative in the world. He began to plan his final move. They would head back to the cabin, not as fugitives, but as hunters. They threw us out of our home, Smokey, William said, his voice echoing with a terrifying authority. Now we're going to take it back. And then we're going to take everything from them. William Wynn didn't believe in luck. He believed in preparation. Inside the hidden cave, he found Samuel Carter's final stash, not just documents, but a tactical cache. His broad shoulders moved with practiced efficiency as he checked the contents. Thermal goggles, high-tensile wire, and several blocks of industrial adhesive. He didn't need guns to win this war. He needed to turn the environment into his greatest ally. His square-jawed face was illuminated by the dim light as he applied dark camouflage grease to his sun-kissed skin, masking the deep forehead wrinkles. Smokey watched his master, his fierce posture mirroring William's resolve. The dog's 30 kilograms frame was a blur of black and tan as he helped William scout the immediate perimeter of the cave. William looked at his loyal K-9. We're going to turn the Bitterroot Mountains into their worst nightmare, Smokey. He attached a small, ruggedized camera to Smokey's tactical harness, linking it to the handheld device he'd recovered. Now, the dog would be his eyes in places no human could reach. They were no longer just two survivors. They were a coordinated strike team ready to reclaim their territory. They began their descent back toward the cabin under the cover of a moonless night. The Bitterroot Mountains were silent, but William could feel the tension in the air. The silent mountain weapon was still being recalibrated by General Vance's men. William moved with the silence of a predator, his salt and pepper hair blending into the shadows. He stayed low, utilizing the natural terrain to avoid the occasional sweep of a drone's infrared lens. Smokey moved 20 yards ahead, acting as the point man. The German shepherd's black and tan coat made him nearly invisible against the forest floor. Suddenly, Smokey froze and dropped into a low crouch. Through the receiver, William saw what the dog saw, a two-man patrol guarding the main trail to the cabin. They were equipped with high-tech sensors, but they were looking for a man, not a ghost. William signaled Smokey with a silent click of his tongue. The dog circled around the guards, creating a faint rustle in the bushes to their left. As the guards turned their attention to the noise, William moved in from the right, not to strike, but to plant a small disruption device on their transport vehicle. Sabotage was an art form, and William was a master. He reached the black SUV parked near the trail. His muscular build allowed him to move with surprising grace as he slid beneath the chassis. With the precision of a surgeon, he bypassed the alarm and linked a small transmitter to the vehicle's communication array. This would allow him to intercept General Vance's encrypted orders in real time. Smokey remained on high alert, his moss-green eyes scanning the tree-line for any secondary patrols. A voice crackled through the interceptor in William's ear. Target Wynn is still at large. General Vance is arriving at the cabin in 1 hour. Secure the bunker entrance. If the veteran resists, eliminate him. William's powerful jawline tightened. Vance was coming personally. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He signaled Smokey to fall back. They wouldn't stop the general on the road. They would face him at the cabin, where the evidence of 30 years of betrayal was waiting to be brought into the light. The predator was now leading the hunters exactly where he wanted them. The cabin looked different through the lens of a tactical objective. William and Smokey reached the clearing 30 minutes before the general's arrival. The contractors were busy at the rear of the house, trying to bypass the secondary locks William had engaged on the bunker hatch. William utilized the shadows of the woodpile to move onto the porch, his short box beard bristling in the cold wind. He didn't enter through the front door. He used the rotted floorboard Smokey had first alerted him to. Inside, the cabin was a wreck, but the central structure held. William began setting his traps. He used a high-tensile wire to create trip lines that would trigger the cabin's old fire suppression system, a cloud of dry chemical powder that would blind anyone entering. Smokey helped by dragging heavy rugs over the areas where the floor was most unstable. As they worked, the low rumble of a heavy helicopter approached. General Vance was here. William stood in the center of the dusty room, his moss-green eyes burning with a cold, hard fire. Smokey position, he commanded. The dog disappeared into the shadows beneath the heavy oak table. The ultimate showdown is about to begin. If you want to see William and Smokey take down the corrupt general, hit that like button and subscribe right now. The helicopter's downdraft sent a whirlwind of pine needles against the cabin windows. 3 black SUVs roared into the clearing, forming a defensive ring. Then the back door of the lead vehicle opened. Out stepped General Vance, a man with cold eyes and a crisp uniform that didn't belong in the rugged Bitterroot wilderness. He walked toward the cabin with the arrogance of a man who owned the world. "Win, I know you're in there," the general shouted. "Give me the drive, and I'll make sure you get a comfortable room in a facility where you can't hurt anyone else." William stood still as a statue, his broad shoulders squared. The front door creaked open, and Van stepped inside, flanked by 2 armed guards. The light from the porch illuminated William's rugged, sun-kissed skin. "You always were a terrible liar, Vance," William said, his voice echoing with a gravelly authority. Vance sneered. "And you always were too stubborn to know when you've lost." He signaled his guard to move in, but William didn't flinch. He knew Smokey was a breath away from the general's throat, and the traps were set. The battle for the Bitterroot secrets had finally reached its boiling point. The interior of the cabin was dim, lit only by the cold moonlight filtering through the dusty windows. General Vance stood near the doorway, his eyes fixed on William. "You think a few old maps and a dog make you a threat, William?" Vance sneered, gesturing for his guards to close the distance. William didn't move an inch. His moss-green eyes tracked the guards as they stepped over the unstable floorboards. "It's not about the maps, Vance," William said calmly. "It's about the fact that you forgot how I was trained." As the lead guard reached the center of the room, his boot caught the high-tensile tripwire William had hidden under a layer of dust. In an instant, the cabin's old fire suppression canisters, repurposed by William, burst open. A massive cloud of white chemical powder exploded into the air, blinding the guards and filling the room with a thick, choking fog. Vance coughed, stumbling back, but William had already donned his thermal goggles. Through the white haze, he saw the guards' heat signatures flailing. "Smokey, go," William commanded. The 30 kilograms German shepherd emerged from the shadows beneath the table like a vengeful spirit, his black and tan coat a blur as he neutralized the first guard with a swift, non-lethal strike to the shoulder. Amidst the white chaos, William moved toward General Vance. His broad shoulders were a silhouette of power in the mist. Vance pulled a small, concealed sidearm, but before he could aim, William's muscular hand clamped down on his wrist with the force of an iron vice. 30 years, Vance," William growled, his square jaw inches from the general's face. "You let Samuel Carter die in a hole while you built your empire on illegal frequencies and stolen minerals." Vance gasped, struggling against William's grip. It was for the country when the Silent Mountain Project was a necessary defense. William's moss-green eyes burned with contempt. Lying to yourself won't save you now. I've already broadcast the satellite kill code. Your defense is nothing but a paperweight. Smokey stood guard over the two incapacitated guards, his aggressive posture and fierce growl keeping them pinned to the floor. The K-9 operative's black ears were swiveled toward the porch. More men were coming, but the primary target was already in William's grasp. The sound of more boots hit the porch. Vance's backup was trying to breach the cabin, but William had anticipated this. He dragged Vance toward the rear of the cabin, where the hidden bunker hatch remained open. "Get down there," William ordered. "You want the bunker so bad? You can see what's left of your secrets." Outside, the contractors began smashing the windows, but the thick chemical powder still hung in the air, making it impossible for them to see inside. Smokey moved to the front door, his powerful 30 kilograms frame blocking the entrance. When a contractor tried to shoulder his way through, Smokey let out a thunderous bark that echoed like a gunshot in the small space. The dog's fierce expression and athletic stance were enough to make the most seasoned merc hesitate. William used that distraction to secure Vance in the bunker's upper landing. He then pulled out the handheld device. "I'm not just turning off the weapon, Vance. I'm turning on the recording. Every word we say is being streamed to the Helena news bureaus." Vance's face went pale, the cold arrogance finally cracking. "You're bluffing. No signal can get through these mountains." William pointed to the long-range antenna he had repaired on the roof. "Smokey and I spent the last 4 hours making sure the world was listening. The Silent Mountain isn't silent anymore." Vance slumped against the concrete wall of the hatch, the weight of his crimes finally settling on his shoulders. He looked at William, a man he thought was a broken relic, and saw instead the warrior who had outplayed him. Outside, the contractors received a frantic call over their radios. The Helena authorities and a fleet of state police helicopters were already crossing the ridge, alerted by the broadcast. The siege of the cabin was over before it could turn bloody. The mercenaries, realizing their employer was no longer in control, began to retreat into the woods. William looked at Smokey, who was still standing guard at the door. The dog's black and tan coat was covered in white powder, but his eyes were bright with triumph. "Good boy, Smokey," William whispered. "We held the line. Justice is finally being served. If you love seeing a veteran and his dog take down corruption, subscribe and stay tuned for the final chapters." As the sun began to peek over the Bitterroot Mountains, the sky turned a deep, hopeful orange. The sound of sirens replaced the hum of the frequency weapon. A fleet of state police vehicles rolled into the clearing, led by an old friend William had contacted during the radio broadcast, a retired colonel who still believed in the oath they had taken. William stepped onto the porch, his hand resting on Smokey's head. His sun-kissed skin was grimy, and his clothes were torn, but he stood with the broad-shouldered pride of a man who had reclaimed his home. Vance was let out in handcuffs, his crisp uniform now stained with the dust of the cabin he had tried to steal. He didn't look at William as they passed. William watched him go, the deep crow's feet around his moss-green eyes softening for the first time in days. He looked at the cabin. It was a mess. The floorboards were ripped up, and the windows were broken, but it was his. And beneath it, the secrets of Samuel Carter were finally being handled by the right hands. But as the authorities began their investigation, Smokey suddenly turned his head toward the mountains, letting out a single sharp bark. The mystery wasn't entirely over. The helicopters had landed, and the clearing was a swarm of federal agents and forensic teams. William stood on the edge of the porch, his muscular build leaning against a support beam as he watched the agents descend into bunker. Smokey sat at his feet, the K-9 operative's black and tan coat finally settling as the adrenaline of the night began to fade. But Smokey wasn't completely at ease. He stood up and walked toward the old stone fireplace, sniffing a loose brick that had been partially dislodged during the struggle with Vance's men. William noticed the dog's persistence. He walked over, his square jaw tightening as he reached into the crevice Smokey was pointing to. Behind the brick lay a small, weather-beaten tin box. Inside wasn't a hard drive or a weapon, but a collection of letters and a small, gold-plated service medal belonging to Samuel Carter. These were personal letters to a family Carter had left behind to protect the secrets of the mountain. William's moss-green eyes softened. He wasn't just a whistleblower. Smokey, he was a father. This box was the final piece of the puzzle, a human connection that the powerful people could never understand or erase. As the morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the deep forehead wrinkles on William's face, a familiar SUV pulled into the clearing. It was Kevin, William's son. He stepped out of the vehicle, his face pale as he looked at the dozens of federal agents and the damaged cabin. He saw his father, rugged, sun-kissed, and covered in the dust of battle. And for the first time in years, Kevin didn't see an old man to be managed. He saw the hero he had forgotten. Kevin walked up to the porch, hesitating at the steps. Smokey stood up, his aggressive expression gone, replaced by a low, welcoming wag of his tail. "Dad, I saw the news broadcast in town." Kevin stammered. "I didn't believe it at first. I thought you were just confused about the cabin." William looked at his son, his moss-green eyes searching Kevin's face. "I wasn't confused, Kevin. I was just the only one left who knew how to look." Kevin looked down at his boots, the weight of his own betrayal unspoken finally hitting him. "I'm sorry for everything." The investigation into General Vance and the Silent Mountain Project became the biggest scandal in the state's history. The illegal mining and mind control experiments were halted, and the Bitterroot Mountains were declared protected national landmark. William refused to move into a government facility or a comfortable apartment. Instead, the community, veterans from all over the country who had heard the story, came together to help him. Within weeks, the cabin was transformed. The sagging roof was replaced with sturdy cedar, and the rotted porch was rebuilt with strong mountain oak. The bunker was sealed forever, becoming a historical archive. But the cabin above it became a home once more. William stood in the new kitchen, his salt and pepper hair catching the light. He looked at the wall where he had hung Samuel Carter's gold medal alongside his own. Justice hadn't just been served to the villains. It had been served to the memories of those who fought in the shadows. Smokey moved through the house with a new sense of pride, his powerful 30 kilograms frame finally finding a place of permanent peace. Winter returned to the Bitterroot Mountains. But this time, the cold didn't feel lonely. The cabin was warm, filled with the scent of pine wood and the sound of a crackling fire. William sat in a new leather chair, his broad shoulders relaxed. Smokey lay by the hearth, his black and tan fur glowing in the firelight. They were no longer the exile of the family. They were the guardians of the ridge. Every now and then, hikers or young soldiers would pass by the cabin. They would see the tall, muscular man with the square jaw and his fierce, loyal German shepherd. They would stop to hear the story of the veteran who was thrown away, but ended up saving the soul of the mountain. William would always tell them the same thing. "It wasn't me who found the truth. I just had the sense to follow the dog. Smokey would look up, his moss-green eyes reflecting the wisdom of a K-9 operative who knew that loyalty was the only frequency that truly mattered. They thought a 70-year-old veteran was a man whose time had passed. They were wrong. William Wynn and Smokey didn't just find a secret. They found their purpose. As the sun sets over the Bitterroot Peaks today, the mountain is silent, not because of a weapon, but because of the peace that only comes when the truth is told. William and Smokey stand on the porch, watching the stars appear. Two old soldiers who finally won their hardest battle. If William's courage and Smokey's loyalty moved you today, please take a moment to honor the veterans in your own life. Comment loyalty. The Channel The Dog and the Veteran is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. All stories presented on this channel are fictional and are creatively developed based on themes such as courage, loyalty, resilience, and the special bond between veterans and their dogs. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is purely coincidental.